This segment is brought to you by Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. All right, we are back. It is good vibes time, straight from a vacation. Debbie Cox de Nova, how you feeling? Relaxed?
I feel relaxed, yeah.
All right, cool deal. Well, good, because it's a good topic to talk about today. And everybody, I think, at some point struggles with this, especially if you're the boss.
Yes.
Asserting yourself kindly.
And that kindly is the most important part there, right? Sometimes people will come to me and they will say, okay, I am being assertive at work, but people are taking me as rude. So I'm trying to just speak from the heart, and they're being put off by it. What am I doing wrong? Okay, so this conversation is more about that because we have talked about assertiveness before. And just as a reminder, there was a study done where people were asked whether they felt themselves to be low assertive, pretty average, right, or high assertive. And you know that 57% of people were actually rated, that thought they were assertive, were actually rated underly assertive by their peers and their colleagues. So we're not very good at telling whether or not we're assertive, okay? So to start off, I'm going to start off with a little true-false quiz that we've done before, just to give the people at home the sort of sense, are you assertive or are you not? Be honest.
Got my pen ready.
Got it? Okay, so this is just true or false, okay? Number one, I can easily express my thoughts or opinions. I can easily express my thoughts or opinions.
Okay.
Two, I feel comfortable when I receive compliments. Three, I find it easy to set boundaries and say no. Number four, I never hesitate to make phone calls. A lot of people have phone stress, right? Five, if someone hurts or offends me, I say something to them. Number six, when food is served at a restaurant that is not to my liking, I feel comfortable letting the host know, or letting the waitress know. Number seven, I can confidently and clearly state my needs. That's the key one. Now, at home, if you've played along, if you have two or more falses, we need to work on your assertiveness. And today it's really important that we make the distinction between assertiveness and aggressiveness, because when someone is coming across as rude, they're actually tipping over into aggressiveness. And that's what puts people off. Because if you're just being assertive, and just to be plain, assertive people know what they want. So at home, you got to know what you want in order to be assertive. If you don't know what you want, you can't be assertive about it.
I just flunked this test.
Did you?
I did.
Oh, that's interesting. I
Poorly.
would have thought you would have aced it.
If something's wrong at a restaurant, I don't say a word.
Yeah. So do you not say a word because you're uncomfortable complaining about it, or because you're like, it doesn't really matter that to me?
Because it's not that important.
Okay, so that's different. That's different.
Yeah.
When we talk about like being afraid of speaking up, right? So assertive people know what they want and they know how to ask for it. So if you kind of weighing it and it doesn't really matter that much to you, then that's a whole different thing. But if you really are like, oh, I'm disappointed with this food, that's not what I asked for, but I'm scared to say something, that's where assertive training can come in.
At work, I'm different than when I'm in a social setting.
Okay. So some of this may help. So this is a skill, like on any other ones that we're talking about, you can develop assertiveness. Let's know the difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness is intent. So we've talked about the drama triangle before. People who are assertive are coming from a specific place that is different from those who are aggressive. When you're coming from aggression, typically it is a signal that you are blaming, shaming, criticizing, judging, like feeling some kind of way and wanting the other person to feel that energy. That's what people react to. That's what they call rude, right? That's when people's walls and defenses go up, they shrink back, or they come back at you, okay? So if you're finding that, oh, I'm an extremely assertive person, but the reaction and the response that you get from other people is either that they shrink back in fear, or that they come back against you, or they're just put off by you, then you're probably actually showing up as aggressive versus assertive.
Important question. But if there's 5 different people with different personalities that react differently to a boss's instruction,
Yes.
they may all get a different angle.
That is definitely true. And, the reality is, depending on who we're talking about, some people believe that they're being too aggressive when they're just being assertive. And some people think that they're being assertive when they're actually being aggressive. That's why we have to actually evaluate what is your come from place, because people actually respond to the energy is transferable. So if you find yourself in a place where it's like people are defending themselves and they're pointing back at you, you're probably inviting them into the drama triangle without recognizing how. So let's go over some things to kind of land this, right?
All right.
You want to be specific, not vague. So if someone turns something in, as a boss, let's just say someone turns something in and it's subpar, right? You don't want to just be like, this is just subpar work. And I just find that you give me subpar work all the time. That's vague, right? They can't do anything with that feedback, right? But if you look at it and you go, in paragraph 3, I'm going to need you to correct this typo, paragraph 4, right? If you're being specific and letting them know exactly how they can do better, that is being more assertive.
Okay.
Number 2, you want to be curious and not parochial. Now, parochial means that you're being narrow-minded, stubborn, you're closed-minded in your own. Curious, of course, is that you are inquisitive, you're eager to learn, you're eager to know, and people can feel that energy, right? So if you're leaning in with curiosity versus having a narrow-mindedness, that's the difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness.
Okay, cool. Hold that thought. This is a good topic.
Yes.
And I'm thinking of musicians, too, and music when you're talking about because they're all on different levels.
Yes.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. More to asserting yourself kindly. We'll be back. This segment was brought to you by Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. All right, we are back. Debbie Cox DeNova, Good Vibes, transformation coach, is alive and well here. And all right, we're talking about asserting yourself kindly. All right, I'm thinking. So assertion in, I guess, relation to the other person's acceptance of your assertion. Does it make
Okay.
sense?
Just
If they
restate it.
if they are not open to your assertion,
Yes.
never going to get through.
That's true. And still, you can come across assertively instead of aggressively. Some people just have a they have a lot of sensitivity to receiving corrective feedback. That's not a you issue, right? You got to know where your own boundaries are. But if you're getting feedback across the board that feels like people are mistaking my straightforwardness for something else, they feel like it feels like it's coming across rude. This is where you may want to check the energy, right? If it's just happens to be somebody who's just kind of closed off then you can still come with kindness. And that's the main thing, is that when someone's being assertive, they are being kind to the other person. And in fact, Vanessa Van Edwards says, you want to think in terms of being aggressively kind. Aggressively kind people are people that are well received in general. You can't please everybody, obviously. But in general, if you are somebody, and it is aggressively kind to say no when the answer is no, to ask for what you actually need. And she's one who talks about, and we've talked about this before, making sure that you're asking for your A work, meaning the work that you're better at than most people, the work that you don't need caffeine for, the work that lights you up, right? A lot of people they're difficult to deal with, and they're in a bad mood because their entire lives, they're doing their D work. And their D work is the stuff that they are actually worse than the average person at, that they hate doing, that they need a lot of caffeine and they have no business doing it. So when you're assertive, you recognize where your strong suits are and where your weaknesses are. And assertive people go after what they are good at relentlessly. They put a lot of energy in it, and they delegate out what they're not good at, because they already know that by doing that, first of all, you're stealing someone else's A-list stuff, and you're draining out your energy for what you actually want. So knowing what you want, going for it, asking for it, unapologetically, that's really important, right? Because sometimes people do these qualifiers I'm really sorry, but can I don't know if this is a good idea, but right, we've talked about that before. So drop the qualifiers, lean all the way in. The problem with people who are not assertive to begin with is that a lot of times they're just not feeling like it's safe to be maybe judged or having someone misread them. And so because of that, all of their cues start to be like they shrink, they block, right? Their voice, their vocal tone actually changes. Their volume gets low. Sometimes they get really nasally and like that vocal fry comes out because they're just not confident, right? And people don't receive them well. So if you're someone who's trying to work on assertiveness, come from an aggressively kind place, recognizing that by you being authentically you, you are actually being aggressively kind to the other person. If you're someone who's a people pleaser, and defaults to yes. So in other words, hey, Martin, do you mind helping me out with this thing tomorrow? And without even thinking about it, you're like, yeah, sure, right? But maybe the answer inside really is no. Vanessa Van Edwards says, start giving yourself time. The default should never be yes if you have that problem.
Yeah, let me think if I have anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I get back to you by the end of the day, right? Or can we discuss this later on? I need to speak with somebody, with my spouse. I need to pray about it. Whatever it is, give yourself the time to think about it, and then only say yes if you are a yes.
But what about in relationships? When I've been in this situation, I know my friends have been in it, that if somebody never wants to hear no. I wrote a song one time, I'm as good as my last yes. And sometimes if you say no to your partner, and I've seen this with my friends too, the night is over.
Yeah. And so and that is kind of a covert, like there's a whole other conversation, but a covert form of aggression actually, right? Because one of the things that distinguishes an aggressive person from an assertive person is confidence versus dominance. So someone who is confident is actually like, I have my own opinions, I have my own thoughts, my own ideas. I don't need to force them on you though. I recognize that everybody has a right to their own, right? And then someone who is dominant is actually using control tactics like shutting down maybe, or fear-based tactics to control the narrative because they have no tolerance for someone else saying something different than the way that they feel.
Right.
So
Very
that's a
true.
relationship issue. That's a whole other show.
Yeah.
You may want to evaluate who you're in a relationship with and have like a conversation about that, because you should never be held hostage. If you're speaking your truth and the other person's truth is different, you should never be held hostage to, a situation where the night is over unless you follow my lead. But that goes again to being assertive and actually being able to speak to, hey, in directness, and this is what Vanessa Van Edwards says, is you just lean in. You lean in, you speak up, you move forward. That's what assertive people do. And but as a consequence, they have better health, they have more productivity, they have lower stress. People like them more because nothing is like, if you're defaulting to yes and then you're canceling last minute because you just really didn't want to, right?
Yeah.
That's actually unlikable. Ironically, you're trying to be likable and you're ending up being unlikable. Whereas if someone can count on you to be a yes when you say yes, then you actually increase your likability. So if you're having a problem distinguishing between, or you're coming across as rude, remember that charismatic people, it's a combination of competence and warmth. If you are being competent and going direct, but the warmth is gone, the kindness is gone, that's probably where the problem is.
All right, great show. Let's do the other one. I forgot the relationship.
The relationship
That's
one.
good. Yeah, like it. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back next week. More with Debbie Cox DeNova on Good Vibes. This segment was brought to you by A.J. Doman Chevrolet. We say yes when others say no.